Good morning and welcome to day 2 of this 30-day adventure to great photos. Let me know how it went yesterday when I asked you to become more aware of all the types of lights that you had surrounding you. Have you noticed the difference? Have you realized how many different types of lights there are around you? I remember the day I started really becoming aware of that when I worked on becoming a professional. It was like stepping out of the matrix and discovering the real world in a way. I started noticing all those different types of lights around me, what was reflecting, what was direct, what was indirect, where it was coming from, what color it had, and the impact it had on what I was seeing around me. Was it creating nice mood, something that is a little bit dramatic, something that was anxious, that made me anxious, or something that made me peaceful? All those things, I started noticing them. It has had a profound impact on my photography. And this is exactly why today we're going to be focusing on only one of them. We're going to be focusing on direct light. So what is direct light? This is a great example of direct light. How so? Well, very simply, direct light is when you have a source of light that hasn't gone through anything. What do I mean by that? It means that this panel hasn't been diffused. There's been no paper in front of it, no diffuser, nothing. It hasn't been reflecting on the table. This is a raw light. Direct light can come from many different sources, as we mentioned. Here are a few examples of direct sources of light. The sun, when there's no cloud, is a great example. A lamp bulb that hasn't been diffused or reflected is a great example. For example, this panel, there's nothing in front of it, which means we get directly the source of light. And obviously, there is also all the lights, the street lamp, the projectors, all those that are not diffused are acting as great direct sources of light. If I turn off this guy, we realize that there's a direct source of light over here that's creating a little bit of a moody ambience. We'll talk about that in a second. So the most important is going to be able to recognize those different sources of direct light and obviously understand how to use them. The best way to actually recognize if you have direct light or not is to look at shadows. What do I mean by that? When you have a direct source of light, you usually have very strong shadows. There is a big difference between the part that is lit up and the part that is in the darkness, in the shadows. It means that the shadows are clearly well defined, and on top of that, you can simply use your hand to do that simple exercise where you just flip it around and you look at the difference of dynamic range from the top of your hand and from the bottom. If you see a very strong dynamic range, let's look at an example over here. If you look at the bottom and it's very dark, and if you look at the top, it's very bright, you're most likely in a direct source of light. Your hand is literally your best tool when it comes to light. I use it every day, even after years. I'm still using my hand to see where the light comes from, what kind of source of light it is, and the color cast it has on my hand. Very, very important. Now you might be wondering, how do we use direct light? Direct light is essential because it defines clearly geometrical shape. It is great for that. It is great in street photography. You might have seen those very contrasted shots. That's a great example of usage. And it is also a great tool when you're trying to do architecture or when you're trying to do very charismatic portraits, because as I mentioned already, you can have something that shapes only one part of the image, which means you can hide out part of the information and leave the rest up to the suspense or to the interpretation of the viewer. All that translates into something essential with direct light. It is to isolate a subject. What do I mean is that whatever is in that direct beam of light is going to be what we pay the most attention to. You're not going to pay attention to me. You're going to pay attention to that little box of light. Now it's going to be all about me, for example, right? So you want to be always thinking about direct light as a great way to isolate a subject and focus on only one part in an image, okay? Now, your mission for today, if you accept it, is going to be seeking direct light. I want you to go through your day and point to all the direct sources of light, and I want you to observe a few things. What source of light created that direct light? Is it a lamp bulb? Is it a fire? Is it the sun? Is it a LED? Tell me what it is. Then I want you to pay attention to the color. What kind of color does it cast? What kind of mood does it create in your scene where you are? And try to think with the example I just showed you, how would you use that particular light in a photograph? Obviously, write all that in your workbook. It will be very helpful to look back at it, and it can always give you inspiration for things you hadn't thought about before. Now I'm gonna wish you a great hunt for direct light, and I will see you tomorrow for a new episode.